I just want to start this this webinar by acknowledging that the Kluge-Ruhe collection is located on the land of the Monica Nation, and pay my respects and our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And since we're joining from locations around the world, I just want to acknowledge that the Indigenous nations where each of us are located, and I encourage you, if you don't know who those Indigenous people are, that you find out and learn about them and their art and their culture. This is our first webinar designed for families, so we would really love your feedback. If after the program you have some feedback, we'd love to hear that. Any feedback that you might have would be really wonderful. And I just wanted to tell you, you families out there, that there is a point in this webinar when we are going to talk about the fact that kangaroos are used as meat and are eaten. So if you think that might be tough for your child, or you don't want to answer more questions about that later, you might just want to leave the webinar after we talk about joeys. So that's kind of your cue to leave if you don't want to address that. Otherwise, I think that's all. I think we're going to get started. I'm going to hand it over to you, Fenella.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Fenella, and we've been looking forward to doing this program for quite a while. Lauren and I don't get to work together like this every day now, so it's really fun to be working on something and to be thinking about families and trying to create something that's fun for you. So kangaroos, the first thing you really need to know, and I'm going to consult my notes a little bit, so you'll have to excuse me. Kangaroos got their name from an Aboriginal word. We call them kangaroos, but in fact, the word was gungaroo, and I hope I'm saying that quite right. And it's a word that was the language word by an Indigenous group up in far north Queensland called the Kluge-Ruhe people. And so they called these animals gungaroo. And when the Europeans arrived, they changed that into kangaroo. And that's how we ended up with this word today. So we thought it'd be fun to look at this painting here and just start by asking, so what are kangaroos anyway, right? We're gonna look and see, we're gonna look at this painting, we're gonna see, and what we thought it would be fun to do would be to think about, first of all, how do scientists look at animals and look at the world around them? Because they use some words that are really helpful when you're trying to identify and understand animals. And so we're going to start with some of those words. The first word that I want you to know is that kangaroos are mammals. And I'm sure you know that word. And there's a few things that mean that there's a few sort of ingredients that scientists agree make something a mammal. And I'm going to go through them, and you think about them and think about whether you know what they are and whether you think a kangaroo, this describes a kangaroo. So the first one is that they're warm-blooded. And warm-blooded means more or less like your temperature is a little bit warmer than the temperature outside, for the most part. So you don't get as cold. If it's freezing outside, you don't freeze, right? That's sort of what warm-blooded means. The other thing is that they're vertebrate animals, and so they have a backbone. And if you look at this painting here, and you look at the kangaroo, you can see that line that goes all the way down the backside of the kangaroo, and that's the backbone. And the backbone is the same thing as a spine. So you can see that the artist actually painted that in there on their painting. Yeah, Lauren's gonna point for us. Awesome.
You can see each vertebrae.
Yep, all the little sections that make up the spine. Kangaroos and mammals have hair or fur, right? Most mammals give birth, their babies are live. So that means that they're not, some animals give birth in eggs. First their babies are in eggs and then they are born. But with mammals, when you give birth, the babies are live. And then also the moms feed them milk. So now that you know these things about a mammal, I want you to think about this. We human beings, are we mammals? What do you think? Let's think about this. Are we warm-blooded? So you know what? I'm going to give you that one. We are warm-blooded. I'm just going to tell you that because that's a hard one to know. Do we have a backbone or a spine?
Yeah, we do.
Ah, yeah, we do. Do we have any hair on our body?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, yes, we do. And then when we're babies and we're born, are we alive right away?
We are.
Yes. And do mommies give us milk sometimes when we're babies? Yes, that's absolutely right. So we are mammals too, just like kangaroos. So that's your first big word. Here's another big word coming at you. Kangaroos are also marsupials. Check that word out, marsupial, right? So that means that they actually carry their young in a pouch. So they have like almost like a little knapsack on a part of their body that the young can crawl into. And kangaroos happen to be the largest marsupials in the whole wide world. So now then, I'm going to ask you again, what about us? Are we marsupials?
No.
No pouch, right? We are not marsupials. Okay, here's one more word coming at you. All the words so far begin with M. Kangaroos are macropods. Macropods, so if you break that word down, macro means big and pod means foot. So macropod means big-footed animal, basically. And so here's a trick question. Are we macropods? Do you know anybody with big feet? I bet you do. But we're not macropods. But at least now you know a new way to describe somebody with big feet.
And we can see that this kangaroo in this painting of the macropod, because look at how big its feet are. It might be tempting to think that just this little part is the foot, but really this whole part can be thought about like as a foot. So they have pretty big feet.
Lauren's gonna show you some interesting things about their feet later in a minute. And then one more question is, how long do you think kangaroos have been in Australia? So this is amazing. Kangaroo ancestors, their great grandparents have been in Australia for over 30 million years. Amazing, right? That's a long time. It's hard even to know how long that is. And then I have a question for you. How long do you think human beings have been in Australia or in the world? How long do you think human beings have been around? Do you think they've been around 30 million years? Nope. They've only been around 6 million years. So kangaroos are actually way older than human beings. They've been around way longer than we.
5 times longer they've been around.
5 times longer, that's right. And the last thing I want to say is that when you look at this painting here, this painting comes from an area where there are lots of paintings of kangaroos on rock, inside cliffs, on the walls of rocks and cliffs. And so this painting is done by a painter who learned sort of how to do this style because they were looking at some rock art. So that's all the things I'm going to tell you about. We're going to turn to Lauren now, who has a bunch of other things to tell you about.
Okay, so we're going to start by talking a little bit more about the kangaroo's body and all the things that its body can do. And we're going to start with its eyes. So, well, before we go into its eyes, actually, I just want to look at this painting that I just showed you on the screen. So we have 2 eyes, right? We have 2 ears, these nice long ears. We've got hands, and these little kangaroo hands or paws, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fingers. So we're going to learn a little bit more about those. They have this nice, big, thick, strong tail that we're going to talk about. And they have these nice big feet, macropod, and nice long legs. So we're going to get into each element that I just talked about. So let's talk about the eyes first. So kangaroo's eyes are on the side of its head. Some of them have really good eyesight. Some of them have worse eyesight. But what's interesting is that their eyesight is actually better when the object is moving. So if there's an object that's still, like maybe like a rock, they probably can't see it that well. But if it's moving, if it's maybe like a predator running towards it, like a wolf or something, or maybe a dingo, which is a wild dog, we're going to talk about them later, they can see that animal moving. So that's pretty cool that their eyesight is better when things are moving. And given that their eyes are on the sides of their head and not on the front of their head like ours are, it means that their eyesight actually goes behind them a lot more. So you can't really sneak up on a kangaroo in the same way that you can sneak up on a human, because they can kind of see behind them a lot more. Now they can't see in that area right in front of their nose, but they can see everything kind of on the side and behind them, which is pretty cool. And the other thing is that they have really beautiful long eyelashes. And their eyelashes actually do the same thing that our eyelashes do. So does anybody know what our eyelashes do? They actually prevent dust from getting into our eyes. And they also prevent our eyes from drying out. Our eyelashes actually do that. And kangaroo eyelashes do exactly the same thing. And because they have kind of these eyes that bulge out of their head a little bit more, they have nice, long, pretty eyelashes. So let's move on to talking about ears. Kangaroos have nice, big, long ears. They kind of have this nice diamond shape to them, which you see sometimes in paintings. And they can actually move their ears independently. So can you all move your ears? Because a few people can move their ears, but just barely. Like we can just wiggle our ears. Whereas kangaroos, they can really turn them, kind of like a horse. And they turn their ears in order to be able to hear better where sounds are coming from. So it helps them hear sounds from all directions a little bit better. The next thing we want to talk about are those hands or the paws that we talked about that have 5 fingers. So you can see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on this hand or paw, and you can see kind of like a dog's paw, there's this nice kind of pad that they have. And interestingly, kangaroos, just like we prefer to use our right hand or our left hand, kangaroos are handed too. And most of them are actually left-handed. This kangaroo, we love this image. It looks like it's stretching and it's about to work out. It's like really serious look on its face. But you can see each of these little individual paws a little bit better. Here are the little fingers. And now for those of you who know about opposable thumbs, kangaroos don't have opposable thumbs, but they do really, most kangaroos do prefer to use their left, whereas most of us often prefer to use our right, which is pretty fun. We talked a little bit earlier about those big feet, and this is a nice close-up image of these huge feet. And you can see, like I mentioned earlier, that really we want to think about the whole thing as a foot for a couple different reasons. So you can see that this part here sort of has that same texture as the paw right down here. And you can see that the kangaroo's foot has kind of 3 big toes. There's 2 little toes and 1 big toe. So we have a little toe, really big toe. And what that means is that when they make tracks in sand or other sort of dirty locations, we have this long line that's right here that makes up the tail track. So that's where the tail dragged. And then we have these little divots in the sand where their feet would have gone. And in paintings, we have that same track show up. So some artists choose to represent kangaroos figuratively, like the one that we saw first and second on this presentation. But then sometimes kangaroos' tracks are shown, and that's how the artist chooses to include or represent kangaroos in their work. So if we're gonna look at this closer up, you can see this is the mark from that big foot. This is the little track from its little 5 fingers. And this is, this is the track from the, from the tail. So that's pretty fun. It's pretty easy to recognize kangaroo tracks in a painting once you know the different parts of a kangaroo's foot. And it's
Lauren, do you think that this painter had seen kangaroo tracks?
Oh, definitely. Yes. And this painting actually is by a really famous artist named Jari. And this is a really wonderful painting. I'll just go back and you can see how he's got kangaroo tracks up here and kangaroo tracks down here. So there's a little bit about the feet. The next thing I want to talk about is that tail. So the cool thing about the tail is that the tail is really strong, as you can see, but also the tail can serve as a 3rd leg. So I just saw a quick question on the Q&A, which is, are these paintings all in our museum? I think you're referring to Kluge-Ruhe, and yes, they are. They're all in our permanent collection, so that's pretty exciting. So the tail actually can serve as a 3rd leg. So you can see this kangaroo is balancing completely on its really strong tail. And these long legs are what is kicking this other kangaroo. So this is Kangaroos Boxing. They call it boxing because they have their little hands that they also fight with. And these are two male kangaroos who are usually the ones who box together.
They're using their back legs for like the boxing kind of, though.
Yeah, they use their back legs and their little front legs.
And their front legs.
Front arms, yep. They use both, so that's pretty exciting. And then the other feature that we wanted to talk about was their fur. So kangaroo fur is super, super, super soft. If we were here in the museum together, all together in one space, I would pass around some kangaroo fur that I brought back from Australia. It is really soft. And sometimes artists choose to represent that in their work. So this is a painting that we have in our collection. I think this painting is really beautiful, but I especially love the texture that the artist has developed with, it looks like a brush of some kind, to give the kangaroo some fur that looks really nice and soft. And we can compare them, and you can see that the texture is actually kind of similar. It's maybe a little more red and maybe a little darker, but it actually looks pretty similar. So I want to look at this painting to see if we have all the features that we just talked about. So we have these two eyes. They look a little closer together in this painting than what we saw in that kangaroo, but we have the two ears that are sort of flopped over. So this kangaroo must be pretty relaxed. We have the 5 fingers that look like they are out and ready to be used in some kind of way. We have these long feet and this nice long tail. And conveniently, this artist has painted all of these special features in white so that we can easily identify them. We also have this nice spine that Fenella talked about. Here we go, each vertebrae. And this artist chose to make each vertebrae alternating colors, which is cool. And I wouldn't say necessarily that this pattern is supposed to be representing the fur, but it definitely gives it a texture kind of like fur, which is fun. So I'm going to give it back over to Fenella, and she's going to talk about
all the different types of kangaroos that there are. So, wow, you know, when I first started learning about kangaroos, I was just assumed that like a kangaroo is a kangaroo and there's just pretty much all the same. But in fact, there's lots and lots and lots of types of kangaroos. And there's lots of ways you can get really complicated with this, but the easiest way to think about it is to think about 4 main groups of kangaroos. And these are the ones, and they live in different parts of Australia. But on the top, you can see the red kangaroo up in the top left, that kangaroo that's a little bit lovely, sort of a nice, really brown color, sort of like the fur color that Lauren just showed you. And that's the largest kangaroo in Australia. It can grow. Oh, did I talk about your tape measure? I forgot about your tape measure. If you guys happen to have grabbed a tape measure, this is a moment to grab your tape measure, because this kangaroo can grow to be 7 feet tall. That is way bigger than me. That is really, really big. That's like crazy big.
We have some basketball players that are that tall, but
most
people are not as tall as the largest kangaroo.
That's right. Yeah. If you were a 7 foot tall person, people would probably think you like to play basketball. Then the other kangaroo next to it over on the right-hand side is the Eastern Grey. And that's a kangaroo that's also pretty big, but it's not quite as big as the red kangaroo. And below that, you see those 2 little kangaroos down there. Those are Western Greys. So sometimes it's really handy because the name tells you sort of like what they might look like. They're coloring a little bit. And then the last one over on the left is a tricky name. It's Antilopine Wallaroo or Wallaby. Kind of confusing. But you can see that that one has a dark gray color, but also has a little bit of brown around its neck.
And it's a lot smaller.
And it's smaller, yeah. It's much smaller, but not as small as something else. Oh my gosh. Do you see this musky rat kangaroo up on the top of your screen over here? That is a kangaroo. And it's 6 inches to 8 inches big. It's, if you get your tape measure out, it would be something like that. So remember that big kiss kangaroo was like huge, and this one's like that. So that's amazing that they can be sort of the same family and be so different. The other two pictures you're looking at right here are of tree kangaroos. And aren't they just the cutest thing in the whole wide world? So,
so cute. We really love the expression on this one's face.
yeah, they're just everything.
Smile. We love it.
And can you see the little baby in there? Yep. Tree kangaroos are actually one of the oldest types of kangaroos because, in fact, all kangaroos started as tree climbers. That's what they first started as. And then slowly, when they came out of the trees, they actually developed, their body changed a little bit. And now most kangaroos don't climb trees, but tree kangaroos do. And then I bet the other thing you're wondering is, what do all these kangaroos eat? Well, like this guy here, they eat plants, and there's a name for that. It's a certain kind of person. So if a person ate plants, we would probably call them a vegetarian. But if an animal eats plants, scientists call them herbivore. And that means it's sort of a plant eater. So you can see this guy here, he's eating some leaves from a bush, I think. And that's what most kangaroos will eat. They'll eat leaves, they'll eat bushes, and they'll eat grass, a lot of grass. And occasionally, some kangaroos eat people's flowers from their garden too. But, and that probably makes people not too happy about it. But that's what they eat. So I have a question for you. Do you think a kangaroo would eat a cheeseburger? What do you think, Lauren?
Oh, cheeseburgers meat. And they don't eat meat, they just eat plants.
That's right, just plants. They're herbivores. Okay, awesome. What do we have next, Lauren?
So we're gonna take a little detour and we're gonna talk about where kangaroos live. And of course, they live in Australia. They live all across Australia, but we're gonna name some different biomes that kangaroos live in. So they live in these grasslands, which look kind of like this. They live in scrublands, which is sort of dry and desertous with some bushes and trees. They live in deserts, especially in the center and in the western parts of Australia. And then that tree kangaroo that we saw, and I think the rat kangaroo too, also they really prefer the rainforest. So different species live in different places. And to demonstrate that, we have a nice little map here that shows you where those big red kangaroos live. So they don't live up here or even up here where the rainforest is, but the red areas are where there's lots of them, and the blue areas are where there aren't that many of them, but there's some. So that gives you kind of some sense of where there's lots of those big red kangaroos. But I also wanted to show you this map because a lot of the paintings that we're talking about today actually come from this area up here called Arnhem Land. And because so many different kinds of kangaroos live up here, that's part of the reason why they show up in paintings a lot, right, in this area. So you can see there's wallabies, there's black wallaroos, there's Antilopian kangaroos, so lots of different kinds of kangaroos, even if we don't have the really big ones up there. And interestingly, there's more kangaroos in Australia than people. So you're going to see some people if you go to Australia, but you'll also see a lot of kangaroos, depending on where you are. And kangaroos live in groups called mobs. So interestingly, some people groups also call themselves mobs. So a mob is a group of people or a group of kangaroos, either one. And some kangaroos are nocturnal, which means that they prefer to be awake at night and sleep during the day. And some kangaroos are diurnal, which means that they prefer to be awake during the day and sleep at night, which is what we prefer, right? We're diurnal mammals. Fun. So I'm going to hand it back to Vanilla. She's going to talk about hopping.
Talk about how they get around. They are the coolest animal because they hop. Check out that kangaroo hopping. Is that not the coolest? Now look, can you also see what that kangaroo has in its pouch? It has a baby kangaroo in its pouch. That's pretty cool.
We'll get to that in just a second.
So I told you that kangaroos didn't always live on the ground. They used to live in trees. But what happened was eventually they came down from the trees a long, long, long time ago. And their back legs got bigger and bigger and more muscular. And they started hopping. They can hop as fast as a car. They can hop 30 miles an hour, which is pretty fast. They also can hop quite high if they want to. They can hop up to 6 feet tall. So remember we were talking about that 7 foot tall? Well, 6 feet is pretty tall. And they also could jump 15 feet if they wanted to in one big jump. So Lauren and I were talking about this and we were saying 6 feet high, 15 feet long. I wonder if they could jump over a car. And we agreed they probably could jump over a car, right?
Probably jump over a car if they wanted to.
That's right. One of the ways that kangaroos are able to hop like this. So if you and I hopped all the time, we would actually probably get pretty tired. But for kangaroos, it's actually a really energy efficient way of moving. And that's in part because they have these tendons in their legs that almost act like springs. And so they compress and then they help them lift. And so something that you might have done that would feel the same way is if you've jumped on a trampoline, you know how much easier it is to jump high on a trampoline? That's kind of because there's kind of a spring action that happens. And that's a very similar thing to what kangaroos are doing with their hind legs. And so it turns out that for them, it's easier to hop and they can hop for very long distances if they want to. Let's take a look at the next painting because these paintings here, so again, you can see this is so amazing that these painters have painted not just the kangaroos, but also like as if they stopped a picture of a kangaroo running like they just stopped the frame. So the one on the top, you can see his feet are sort of pointing forward and it's like he's just about to go and touch on the ground. And the one vertically, you can see the feet are way back. They're stretched out like he's already in motion and his legs are stretched way behind him. So this artist has spent a lot of time looking at kangaroos in order to know how to paint them. These are two different artists, sorry. But they really knew kangaroos well in order to know how to paint them. Now, there's one thing that hopping, there's lots of things hopping are good for kangaroos, but there's one thing a kangaroo cannot do. They cannot hop backwards. So what that means is if they need to go get something behind them, they have to hop around in a circle to turn around. That's too bad, but they can do one thing that I bet you don't expect, which is that they can swim. They're actually pretty good swimmers. And that would be, when I first learned that, I was kind of surprised by that because they didn't really look like swimmers to me. But no, they're really good swimmers. So that's the thing. Kangaroos can do all sorts of different kinds of motions. And that's not even talking about the kangaroos that can climb trees, because there's still the kangaroos that can climb trees.
So we're going to transition now to talking about
exciting
kangaroos, which are called joeys. Oh, we have a really cute little rhyme that we do in Tatanat. Some of you are joining, I think, who have been to Tatanat, like Elwyn. And we have a cute little rhyme about sleepy kangaroos who hop around like little joeys. But we thought we'd spend some time on joeys, partly because they're so stinking cute, and partly because this whole marsupial thing of babies being in pouches is so foreign to us. And we wanted to learn more about it, and we thought you probably would too. So we're going to talk about how kangaroos start when they're born and then how they grow. And yeah, very interesting. So first of all, kangaroos, when they're born, actually start out as like a blob. It's kind of just like a blob. They look like this. We think it's a little bit gross. They're kind of the size of a jelly bean. So they're really small. And somehow that flesh makes its way, once it's born, up into the mama's pouch. And once it's inside the pouch, it finds a teat to grab onto. And that teat, once it grabs onto that, enlarges. And that's what keeps that baby in place as it continues to grow. So it's born and it definitely can't get out of the pouch on its own. Obviously, it doesn't have any legs or anything quite yet. And so it's really in the pouch that it grows into starting to look like an actual kangaroo. And eventually, right, it starts to look like this. And then eventually it starts to look even bigger. This is, I think, like a miniature species of kangaroo, but they're little. They're little for a long time. And interestingly, the mama's pouch, they have a couple different teats that baby kangaroos can get milk from. And the mama kangaroo she can produce two different kinds of milk. So she has a really really young joey, like this one, and then an older joey, she can produce one milk for the younger joey and a different milk for the older joey, which is amazing to me. I'm sure the mothers out there would be also amazed by that. Now here's the thing. We have a potty question for you. Do you think that joeys pee and poo in the mama's pouch? If you had to guess, which one would you guess, Vanilla? Because I thought they probably did.
They must pee in the pouch if they
I thought so too. But actually, no, they do not. They do not pee or poo in the mama's pouch. They don't actually pee or poo at all until they feel the mother's tongue on them, which means that she's able to wash them. So until they can be washed, they don't actually do any peeing or pooing. And even when they can get out of the pouch, which is about at 8 months, they still like to sometimes stay behind with their brother and sister. And that's when they start to pee and poo outside of the pouch.
Oh, there he goes.
Oh, do you see it? Yeah, we love this little GIF. It's very cute. That little baby. She's kind of helping him at the beginning.
Can you see how they're kind of uncoordinated at first? They don't quite have control over all their legs and arms.
Yeah, they kind of look like baby horse foals.
Mm-hmm.
Are kind of like that too. They can't quite get out. But this joey is still just trying to figure out how to get out of its pouch. By the time that they are 10 months old, they are too big for the pouch. So interestingly, they're only kind of getting in and out for a couple months, and then they're too big. But before they're too big, when the mama is relaxed, like you see in this little GIF, the pouch is pretty flexible and it's relaxed, and so the joey can get in and out. But if she was going to start running, she has a bunch of muscles in that pouch, and she can tighten those muscles, and that makes her pouch kind of like a car seat and a safety belt, where they can't move, they can't get out. Every now and then a baby might fall out of the pouch, but for the most part, that pouch really keeps them tight and safe in there. And we have, here's another cute little GIF for you. At a zoo, a little joey going somersaulting into a pouch. Oh, how much cuter can you get than that?
You see how they go in head first and then they turn.
And then they kind of get their legs in.
Yep.
The legs are the hardest part, right? Because they're long and thin.
That's right.
And they just somersault right in there.
Yep.
Which is pretty cool. So we have a number of paintings. I don't know about a lot, but we have a number of paintings in the collection that feature mama kangaroos with joeys. So I guess first question is, do you see the joey, right? Where is the joey? We have this big painting with this nice big mama kangaroo with a nice strong tail and her little feet. Look, we even have the long toe and the two little toes on either side, and these cute little birds chirping at the kangaroo. There he is. There's that joey. And if you want to look at him closer, there he is. So what I love about this painting is that this mama kangaroo looks pretty relaxed, because look at how flexible her pouch is, right? It doesn't look like she's hopping, and that pouch looks nice and flexible. So that joey looks like maybe he's talking to this bird, and like maybe he's about to jump out of there for the first time. Who knows? And we have another sort of test for you to see if you can find the joey. So see if you can find the joey in this painting.
This painting is a little harder to find, isn't it?
A little harder. The image is not quite as good, so sorry about that.
But at least you know where to look for the joey, right?
You know where to look. And there's, I think the other thing that's hard about this painting is there's all this beautiful dotting, right? And all these beautiful patterns that make it harder to see this little joey, which is right there. There it is. Its little head is poking out. And we saw on that GIF of the kangaroo running, right, is that often the head is out when they're running in the pouch. So that's pretty fun. Okay, so we're going to move on to.
Awesome. So
we might be talking about kangaroos and eating them. So if you want to leave.
That's right. Yeah. We're going to talk about how human beings and kangaroos have related, because you can see from the paintings that human beings have paid a lot of attention to kangaroos over time. Kangaroos must be pretty important to be in this many paintings, right? So this painting So for you little ones, I want you to see how many kangaroos you can find in this painting while I'm talking, okay? There's a couple in there, right? See if you can find the kangaroos. And then also, I want you to look and see if you can see any human beings in this painting. And I think if you look closely, what you'll see like on the bottom, over on the left side, you can see a man standing, and then he has a long something in his hand that's very long and is pointing towards that kangaroo. Well, so this is where we're going to talk about how kangaroos have lots of, kangaroos and human beings, sorry, for kangaroos, this is the way I want to say it. For kangaroos, humans are often, sometimes they're friends and sometimes they're enemies, right? They kind of can be, depends a little bit which one they are. And so one of the things that human beings have done is they have hunted kangaroos for a long time. And they've used different things to hunt kangaroos. So if you look at that thing that man is holding, I want you to now, Lauren, can you show us the next painting? Next slide. So there's lots of tools that human beings have used to hunt kangaroos. Probably the most obvious one that some of you guys would have heard of is Boomerang. So this is just a collection, a drawing of showing you the whole range of different shapes. A lot of people think boomerangs are only just like one shape, like the one on the top. But actually some boomerangs are only a little bit curved. Some boomerangs, called 7 boomerangs, they have kind of a 7 shape. Some are that kind of classic sort of comma shape. So they come in lots of sizes and shapes, and people generally would, use different boomerangs for different things. Boomerangs would be used to hunt. They would be thrown, and they also would be used sort of like a club. And then Lauren,
really quickly, I just want to say, we think about boomerangs as these cool sport things that come back to us, but most boomerangs weren't meant to come back to you. They were meant to hit an animal with a lot of accuracy, animals like kangaroos, to hunt them. So
yep.
I wanted to mention that. We think of kangaroos as boomerangs as things that always come back, but really most of the time they didn't come back.
Most of the time they only went one way, towards the animal, right?
Yeah.
And then in these pictures, you can see on the right-hand side, that long, thin thing, that's a spear. And that's a spear from our collection, Kluge-Ruhe. And you can see at the top, it's got a really tight point up there. That's the end that would actually go and hit the animal. What you might not know is this thing that's over on the other side, that's kind of like a teardrop shape. It's called a woomera. And a woomera is a tool that actually you would hold that and you would put your spear kind of on the end, on a point, and you would use that to push your spear even farther. And it would kind of make your spear into like a super spear. You could throw your spear much, much farther and with more force if you used a woomera. So that's what we were seeing in those paintings just before.
Oh, there they are. There is that woomera.
See that?
There's the spear.
So this is a painting about hunting.
Cool.
People also now this is interesting, because if you look at this painting on the left, there's a kangaroo, the big animal, and then there's a small animal just beside it. That's a dingo, which is kind of like a dog, a wild dog. And in the painting on the right, you can see a kangaroo that looks like it's already had most of the meat taken off, right? And it's just, you can see the bones, but you can also see these dogs eating it. So I know this is a little gross, but people used dingoes to help them hunt kangaroos and run them down also. And then the dingoes would get some of the meat and the people would get most of the meat. So there's lots of different ways that people have hunted kangaroos. They've even put poison in watering holes where they knew that kangaroos would go, so that kangaroos would get sick and then they could go ahead and hunt them. I know that this is kind of gross. We're going to show you a slide that's really cool and also really gross, which is this one. This is a dismembered kangaroo. So this is a slide. If you were eating kangaroo, if you had hunted a kangaroo and you wanted to take it back to your family, you might lift it up and carry it back, but probably it would be so heavy that you would want to chop it up into pieces so that you could carry bits of it at a time. And also, Lauren, you have one more slide, right? Also, we usually, when we are eating meat, we cut the meat into pieces. It's called butchering, right? So we cut the meat into pieces because that's the way that we can have a smaller piece and we can cook it. And if we want to save another piece for later. So these paintings are showing you kangaroos that the Aboriginal person who's painted them knows, oh, I know how to hunt a kangaroo. I know how to butcher a kangaroo. And I know what parts to save and what parts are special for things. And there's lots of things that kangaroos are used for in addition to meat, right? So of course they eat the meat. But, oh, Lauren was saying it tastes like beef, by the way.
It's really good. Kangaroo tastes really good.
A lot of people wonder.
Finale, before you go on, I just want to note there's another little woomera right here.
Oh yeah.
And here. And then there's little axes, right, that would have been used to butcher the kangaroo, and a little bag too. Yep. And mimes who taught Aboriginal people how to use these tools. Yep.
And there's hand prints up in the top right of the artist, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a very complicated thing to hunt and then butcher a kangaroo. So once you've gone to all that work, you really want to make sure that you use everything that you can. So the fur was used for various things, including maybe if you needed something warm. The skin was used for a variety of things, including you could use skin to make almost like a little cup to hold liquid water in if you needed to. And then there are the tendons and the sinews that come that are sort of not, they're sort of very tough, sort of string-like parts of the body. And those would be used to tie things, to use as string, basically. And then there's even times that they would use the teeth of the kangaroo to as a needles, so that they could take that string and, you know, put it through something else. So really, if you have worked really hard to hunt and capture a big animal like a kangaroo, you are really going to make sure that you use every single little part that you possibly can. So that's one of the main ways that human beings are not always kangaroos' friends, but there are a few other ones also. So let's see, is there another slide? Yes. So this looks like just a pretty picture, but we put this in because probably today one of the biggest dangers to kangaroos is a car. So you can see this kangaroos hopping across a road. And just like here in the States, where sometimes if a deer is crossing a road, a deer gets hit by a car, kangaroos get hit by cars and they die because of that. So sometimes, you know, they're just living their life and then this big metal vehicle comes along and crashes into them. And it's really sad when that happens. And then there's one other thing that humans sometimes can cause, which can cause a really big problem for kangaroos, and that's wildfires. So recently in Australia, there were a tremendous amount of really damaging wildfires, and they burnt out of control. And one of the things about an out of control fire is that sometimes people have a hard time getting out of the way, but absolutely a lot of animals have a hard time getting out of the way sometimes. So we know that in the most recent wildfires, it's estimated that over 1 billion animals perished. They died in the fires because they just couldn't figure out how to get away from the flames. So often those fires sometimes they're started by nature, by lightning, but often they're started accidentally by human beings. And so that's one of the ways that also kangaroos, you know, can have a really tough time, that humans can make their life harder. Yeah.
But sometimes humans,
right?
Pardon?
I said, but there is some good news, right?
Yeah, there's some good news. Sometimes humans are friends of kangaroos, and actually sometimes that's true with wildfires even, so, or with fires. So, well, and in the recent wildfires, we were both the problem, but we also helped take care of them, right? We helped rescue them from some fires. So that was something that we did too. But traditionally, Aboriginal people would burn part of the landscape on purpose, and that actually helped kangaroos. So that was one thing that was done. But one of the biggest ways that we see people and kangaroos being friends is that kangaroos show up a lot in artworks as ancestors that Aboriginal people came from, especially ancestors that could transform from humans into animals, sometimes into rocks and other features of the landscape. But this painting is really fun because this is the kangaroo ancestor Garjambal, and you can see the kangaroo is really large and very overwhelming, and the way that the artist has organized this this painting. There's lots of other things happening all around the kangaroo, but the kangaroo is in the very center. Really important, right? And we see that X-ray style again, which is when you can see the inside of the animal as well as the outside. And we see those feet again. So kangaroos definitely show up as ancestors a lot. Another example is this painting, which shows a really big kangaroo with another animal called an echidna. And this is what an echidna looks like. Oh, we have bingo. Yay, Ellen got it. So Ellen will get you a prize. So
good job.
Yeah, yay, you got them all. Thanks for following along, that's fun. So we have an echidna that's kind of like a porcupine, represented with this big kangaroo. And then we also have this beautiful painting that a lot of us at Kluge-Ruhe love of a rainbow serpent, which is a really special ancestor, and another kangaroo. So you see that happening a lot. So we're gonna transition a little bit just at the end to show you some of our favorite paintings and other objects that feature kangaroos. And we're just going to each tell you one thing that we like about each of these paintings, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A. So if you have questions about kangaroos or about any of these paintings, start thinking of them now and maybe type them into the Q&A while we show you a few more paintings in our collection.
That's great.
So what about this one, Fenella?
Oh my gosh, I love this painting. This kangaroo is big and strong, but I am curious because there's a part about this painting that I don't actually know what it is. So if you look at the top of the painting, you can see, yep, some black shape coming down from its head. I know what that is. That's like the esophagus and the lungs and the stomach. But then there's this shape that looks like upside down hills. And I have no idea what that is. And I asked Lauren and she doesn't know either. And if I could ask the artist a question, I would ask the artist, what is that? Because it looks awfully important.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about this painting is how that those internal organs are shown as basically a clover. It looks like a clover shape to me. I also like how the kangaroo's head is shown in a profile, right? You can only see one of its eyes. So we're just seeing the side of the kangaroo's face. And I kind of like that. I think it's fun. And I like its ears look pretty real too. They look like that real shape of a kangaroo's ears. Okay, what about this one, Fenella? What do you like about this one?
Well, this is kind of funny, but I actually like the way this kangaroo is kind of wiggly along the top. Like the lines are going different directions and even the outline is kind of wiggly and even the wood is a little wiggly. And I think I like it because it makes it, for me, it makes it look like the kangaroo's moving actually.
Yeah, I really like how you can almost see every little brushstroke. So this painting, like a lot of these paintings on bark from a eucalyptus tree in Northern Australia, is these are natural pigments. So homemade paint on these paintings. And I like how you can almost see every brushstroke. It's very painterly, very painterly.
It is, yeah.
And then this is really interesting. So this is an ornament, and these are actually kangaroo teeth. So we talk about the teeth being used as a needle, but sometimes they were used to make ornaments and jewelry. And you can see this is handmade string and some cloth, and this is tree gum. What do you find interesting about this, Fenella?
Well, when I look at this, it looks to me like it's kind of heavy. So I think about wearing it as a necklace. It looks kind of heavy, but it also looks to me like those teeth would probably like jiggle a little bit if you were dancing or something. So I wonder if it makes noise.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed. It looks like Virginia or Elizabeth Wells got bingo before Ella did. So we have our 2 prize winners.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do. Sorry, we have both of them. Yes.
Sorry, I only saw the one at first.
Oh, no. Yeah, good job, both of you.
Yeah, well done. So the next image is one that is pretty cool. This is by Rico Rennie, and he's a good friend of Kluge-Ruhe's. And so Rico came and he painted this diamond pattern all over the walls of the museum. So if you can imagine how overwhelming and fun that would be to see, there's videos on our YouTube channel if you want to check it out. It's pretty cool. But I really like how he uses this big red kangaroo as a symbol to talk about how strong Aboriginal people are, and also how long that they've been in Australia, because he kind of uses kangaroos to as sort of a symbol for both of those things.
Yeah, and you know, for the most part tonight, we've seen paintings in our collection, and this is the one thing that actually starts from a photograph. So that kangaroo in the middle is a photograph of a kangaroo, and then he transformed it into a print. So it's kind of interesting to see such a realistic kangaroo after all those paintings.
Yeah. Our next painting is by a really famous artist named Clifford Possum Jari. And we see lots of tracks. Look at all these kangaroo tracks that go all over the painting. It's very exciting. There are lots of other things too, but I really like how there's all these different colors, all these different kind of almost puzzle pieces that look like they fit together, of different areas of color dotting. And then you have on top of that all these little kangaroo tracks. So that's one of the things I love about this painting.
And for me, when I look at this painting, I see something that actually the artist really did on purpose, which is it feels to me like I'm way up in the sky, almost like a bird looking down on the land. In the art world, we call this an aerial perspective. But I feel like I'm a bird looking down on the land, and like I could see all those kangaroos, that mob of kangaroos sort of hopping around all over looking for food and things. So I really get that sense of the kangaroos in the landscape traveling around.
So our last painting is one that doesn't have any kangaroos or tracks in it, but we know that it's about kangaroos and a kangaroo dreaming story at Lake Mackay. And we see the lake right here in the middle, but we don't see necessarily any evidence of kangaroos. And that's because sometimes the story behind a painting is a secret. And this is one of those paintings, but we thought we'd include it because we like the idea that it's still about kangaroos, even if we can't necessarily see them or see any evidence of them.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We wish we could see you in person, and we can't wait to see you soon. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.